Every once in a while, someone comes along who doesn't just design beautiful patterns, but who reshapes the way we think about knitting. Elizabeth Zimmermann was one of those people, and today I want to tell her story. The story of the woman who made knitting fun again. Her patterns don't just teach you how to knit, they give you the confidence to trust your own hands. For decades, knitters have said that Elizabeth didn't just change the way they knit, she changed their lives. If you have ever knitted in the round, improvised a sweater, or used percentages instead of fixed numbers, you can thank Elizabeth for it. Hi, I'm Annika and welcome back to my Knitting Icons series, where we talk about knitters and makers who shaped the knitting world as we know it today. And in this video, we are diving deep into the remarkable story of Elizabeth Zimmermann, who she was, her inventive techniques, how she built a knitting empire from her Wisconsin home, and why her work still feels so modern and freeing today. Elizabeth Zimmermann was born in 1910 in England and learned how to knit at an early age. According to her daughter, Meg Swansen, knitting was automatic for girls at that time. One knits as one breathes, she said. Elizabeth learned how to knit from her mother and her aunts, who were very skilled but also expected her to be self-reliant with her knitting. Elizabeth attended boarding school in England and then later on art schools in both Switzerland and Germany. And then in 1937, Elizabeth and her husband, Arnold Zimmermann, whom she had met in Germany, moved to America, and they eventually settled in Wisconsin, the land of ice and snow, as she affectionately called it, probably because it felt familiar with her English roots. The family lived in a converted schoolhouse, which would later on become the Schoolhouse Press, a mail-order knitting business that is still run today by her daughter Meg Swansen. The knitting landscape that Elizabeth found in the US was very different from what she was used to growing up. Knitters were deeply dependent on printed patterns, and yarn shops offered only inconsistent help. This mix shaped her philosophy: the independence of British knitting, the technical expertise of German knitting, and the wide-open creative potential she saw in America. Meg said that her mother recognized a big hole in American knitting culture, and she stepped in to fill it. She was a knitter, teacher, writer, designer, philosopher of craft. But what really set her apart was that she didn't just follow the rules, she questioned them. And this questioning led to some of the biggest breakthroughs in modern knitting. In the 1950s, Elizabeth initially sold her knitting patterns to magazines like McCall's or Women's Day. But the magazines constantly rewrote her pattern instructions to fit the American conventions at that time. No circular needles, everything knit flat in pieces, seam it all, no percentages, and no improvisation. Her seamless sweaters were turned into complicated pieced garments. The final straw came when she submitted a knitting pattern to a magazine that became the cover of the magazine, beautifully photographed, but inside her instructions were completely rewritten. Meg Swansen said that she rarely saw her mother angry, but this truly frustrated her. So Elizabeth did something bold. She rewrote the pattern instructions, typed them up, and mailed them herself. This would become Newsletter 1, the beginning of the now iconic wool gathering series, which is still published today by her daughter Meg Swansen through Schoolhouse Press. That moment changed knitting history. And slowly but surely, Elizabeth Zimmermann's philosophy began to spread. Her philosophy was summed up in one phrase that she repeated constantly: "You are the boss of your own knitting." She wanted knitters to stop being afraid, to trust their own hands, and to stop saying and thinking that they were not good enough. She eliminated unnecessary purling, unnecessary seams, and patterns that were written in a way that knitting felt like a chore. And she replaced them with tools that gave knitters freedom. Elizabeth believed that knitting should be simple, logical, mathematical, joyful, and most of all, creative. Not something to follow rigidly, but something to explore. Her most famous idea is the percentage system, which allows you to calculate the sweater shaping and the pattern based on your gauge and your body measurements instead of just following strict step-by-step instructions of a fixed pattern. So the percentage system, short EPS, is based on two things, your gauge and your desired chest circumference. That number, K, the key number, becomes the basis for the whole garment. So the chest circumference would be measured as 100%. It's simple, logical, and totally liberating. And here's a lovely detail. The name EPS wasn't Elizabeth's idea. It was her husband's, Arnold. He recognized that it was a system bigger than a pattern and named it accordingly. Elizabeth also championed knitting in the round, seamless garments, top-down construction, the I-cord, improvisation, and letting go of perfection. One of her most famous quotes is, "Knit on with confidence and with hope through all crises." And honestly, it resonates just as much today as it did back then. Elizabeth's newsletters were witty, conversational, and full of life. The original knitting blog, as Andrea from Fruity Knitting called them when she interviewed Meg Swansen in episode 57 of the Fruity Knitting podcast, which I'm going to link for you in the description box below, along with everything else that I'm mentioning in this video. People adored her writing style so much that they felt like they were receiving a letter from a close friend. And after she had appeared in a TV show, she was also offered her own TV series, which was called The Busy Knitter, and it was a surprise hit across the country. And then came the letters. Meg said they have 12 enormous scrapbooks filled with fan mail, hundreds of letters, and the most common phrase was, "You changed my life." Not just their knitting life, their confidence, their creativity, and their sense of self. Elizabeth believed that knitting was a serious craft worthy of artistic respect, and she fought against the idea that it was just domestic work. She used knitting to empower people. Let's talk about a few of the designs that made her legendary. The Baby Surprise Jacket, short BSJ, was published in 1968. It has a seemingly abstract shape that folds itself into a perfect jacket. It is still magical and still widely knit, decades later. Thousands of knitters have made it. Many call it a rite of passage. Then we have the Tomten jacket that's named after Scandinavian folklore. It is chunky, cozy, playful, and perfect for using scrap yarn. The pie shawl is a masterpiece of mathematical elegance. Its increases are placed exactly where they're needed, and only where they're needed. The stitch increases double at intervals that approximate the ratios of P, hence the name. The Ganymede hat is a cheerful pointy hat with a unique fit that always brings a smile. And then there's the seamless hybrid sweater that's used by so many modern designers as a foundation for their work. And of course, the countless books she has published. Knitting Without Tears, Knitter's Almanac, Knitting Around, Knitting Workshop, and many more. Meg Swansen isn't just Elizabeth's daughter. She is an icon in her own right. She has taken Elizabeth's work and expanded it, mainly in the fields of colorwork and yoke construction. She continues to publish the Wool Gatherings and run Schoolhouse Press together with her son Cully and his wife Michelle. Elizabeth Zimmermann wasn't just a designer, she was revolution in human form. A gentle rebel, a witty, fearless knitter who treated yarn as both a serious art form and a source of deep joy, and who left us a legacy of freedom every time we pick up our needles. Wherever you are in the world and whatever you are up to, don't forget to knit on with confidence and with hope through all crises. See you next time. Happy knitting. Bye.